So what's going on, English 108? I hope everybody's doing well and you're recovering from the tryptophan-induced coma that I'm sure you're all in from the turkey that you ate this past weekend. So we're really in the home stretch here, and we're headed into the final assignment of the semester, believe it or not, and that is your recommendation report. And so let me tell you a little bit about why I developed this assignment and why I have you do it and sort of what I hope you learn from it. So essentially, the recommendation report is a capstone assignment, and what that means is it's really an assignment that ties the whole semester together and really challenges you to do many of the things we've been doing individually throughout the semester. So my expectation is that this assignment will force you to exercise many of the same muscles that you've used in various other assignments, but this time you'll have to do it in sort of a longer form, and you'll be doing it simultaneously. And so maybe by now, but certainly in the very near future, you will have read the assignment sheet for this particular assignment. And essentially what this is a series of scenarios, and you'll choose one of those scenarios to respond to, and you'll be making a recommendation that helps to solve a problem for somebody. And so one of the scenarios, for instance, is a superintendent of schools, somebody who doesn't know a tremendous amount about technology but is really concerned with the well-being and the learning of their students, has won a grant, and they are to buy tablets for 7th and 8th graders. And your job as the IT director for that department is to go out and research what the best option for their students would be. And so in doing this, not only are you going to have to research the available options, you are going to have to present information about the available options in a way that makes sense and facilitates comparisons for the reader, who is somebody who doesn't know a tremendous amount about the subject matter. So what that's going to require you to do is to think really carefully about what your reader cares about and what's going to really ultimately move the needle with them and help them make a decision. So and you're going to have to really do a number of things quite well in order for this report to be successful. First and foremost, you're going to have to do really solid research. You're going to have a really good foundation of data and information upon which to make your decision, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a second. You're going to have to format this for easy reading and comparing. So ultimately what you're going to do is you're going to create a report where you put the data in front of the reader so that they can compare, but you also help them see the important similarities and differences, convergences between the data. You're going to have to explain things really well. You're going to have to format the document for easy reading and easy location and referencing of information. And then you're going to have to write a really persuasive and engaging and compelling conclusion that stands behind and corroborates your decision. So let's take those individually. And keep in mind here, no matter which scenario you pick, and I don't want to create a 30-minute video here, so I won't go through all of them, but no matter which scenario you pick, you're going to be writing to somebody who doesn't know a lot about the particular subject matter. They may be experts in other areas, or they may care about other things. They may be the chief financial officer, so they may know a lot about efficiency and money, or they may be an executive director of a nonprofit, so they understand the use, but maybe not the specifications or the details. And that's by design, and that's to get you to write in ways where you focus more on benefits and limitations than you do on features. And what I mean by that is, it's really easy when you're looking at something like a tablet, for instance, to speak in pretty abstract terms, terms that wouldn't resonate necessarily with a superintendent of schools. You could talk about retina displays, or gigabytes, or gigahertz, or 11-inch screens, or Gorilla Glass, or whatever. And these are relatively abstract concepts if we just talk about them as features. But if we hone in on them and explain the benefits or the limitations of those things, those data points and those details, then what we do is we reveal the usefulness of that particular product or that particular tool or piece of equipment. So you're going to have to be very mindful of that. So you're certainly going to have to overcome some jargon here, and you're going to have to write about things in a very context-specific way. And again, we've practiced this in writing our fact sheets, but you're not recommending a tablet for general use. You're not recommending a tablet for use in a business setting. You are recommending a tablet for use in an educational setting with a very specific demographic of students, 7th and 8th graders. And so what that does is that places a different amount of emphasis on certain things. So for instance, it's probably not a stretch of the imagination to think that a tablet being assigned to 7th and 8th graders probably has to be considerably more durable than it would be if you were assigning it to high school seniors. And it probably has to be a little bit more powerful and have certain functions and capabilities that you wouldn't need for a tablet if you were, say, assigning it to kindergartners. So your job is to show not only that it's the best tablet, but that, more importantly, that it's the best tablet for specific use. And that's true of all of the various things that you're looking at, whether it's a fleet of cars, a heating system, a fleet of welders, a set of thermometers. Your job is to show that they are the most appropriate for that particular use. And so one of the ways that you're going to do that is you're going to think about the criteria that you use to assess. And so when you're thinking about criteria, I want you to think not only about what criteria matter to the particular reader, because not all criteria will matter the same. So, for instance, when you're looking at cars, there's innumerable criteria you could use. You could look at the sound system. You could look at the climate control. You could look at the ergonomics of the seats. You could look at storage capacity, horsepower, fuel economy. You could look at the materials. I mean, there's so many different things you could look at. But in the particular scenario that involves cars for this class, it's a very specific use profile. Those vehicles are going to be used to deliver parts in central Maine. And so in the scenario has more specific details and ideas about what this person's looking for. So you're going to have to hone in on the criteria that matter the most. In other words, the ones that move the needle the most or carry the most weight. So you have to have some methodology relative to that. You have to think carefully about which ones are the most important, which ones should be given the most weight or have the most leverage. And then more importantly, or as importantly, I guess I should say, is that you should figure out ways to measure or assess these criteria. Now, some of these are going to be relatively easy. For instance, price. Price is pretty straightforward in most cases, but we can talk about this. But you have to, I mean, price is one of those things that's easily quantifiable. You can put a dollar sign on it. So if you're talking about a fleet of cars, it's pretty easy to talk about the sticker price. But what I want you to realize is that when we start talking about criteria, there may be some nuance to that. So for instance, if we're talking about a heating system, certainly there's the sticker price of the heating unit itself, the furnace, or the boiler, or whatever. But then there's also other costs involved. So you want to make sure that you're thinking sort of holistically about these criteria. So also wrapped up in the idea of cost, we have installation costs, we have maintenance costs, we have fuel costs. So you have to be very careful in thinking about the information that matters to your particular reader, and you have to be comprehensive, but at the same time you don't want to include stuff that's unnecessary or extraneous. So I want you to think really carefully about that. So we have to have some idea of what the criteria are, and we have to examine them critically to see if there's any level of nuance. And then we have to figure out how we're going to measure them. And again, some of them are going to be pretty easy to measure. If we're talking about cars and fuel economy, that's pretty straightforward. We're going to talk about that in miles per gallon. That's the unit of measure. But again, I want to point your attention to something. Usually when we talk about that metric, we're talking about it in one of two ways. We're talking about city or highway. And depending on the scenario that you're writing about, city may be more valuable than highway or vice versa. So you want to think about that. So part of the goal of this assignment is to get you thinking that data is not transparent, language is not transparent. It's up to us as technical writers to provide supportive ideas and supportive material and details that help our reader make sense of that information. So, and the other thing that I want you to think about relative to your criteria is this. Some of them are very hard to quantify. In other words, you can't put a number with them easily. And so an example of that might be something like durability. So if we're looking at tablets and we know that one of the key things we need to have is durability, we need to think about how to objectively assess multiple options across the same criteria. And so there's no real number, no way to weigh this, measure this objectively. There's no tool necessarily that I know of anyway, that I have or that we have access to that allows us to measure durability. So then we have to think of some systematic way, a system that we can repeat that allows us to assess that given criteria. So when we're talking about durability, there's a number of ways that we could do that. One of the ways is, for example, to look at the materials. What is it made of, and how well do those types of materials typically hold up over time? So obviously there's a big difference between a tablet that has a plastic back and something that has an aluminum or a magnesium back. We might also go to a third party, and we may look at maybe there are third parties that test these types of things, and we may be able to use their information. So for instance, if Consumer Reports has done various types of durability tests on tablets, then we may be able to leverage that information. But the key is We need to be comparing apples to apples, and we need to be consistent and systematic because we need to kind of run each option through the same set of tests. So that's something that you're really going to have to think about in compiling this report. Ultimately, your job in writing this report is to present a methodical, systematic, and a transparent body of information that helps somebody make a decision. Nothing should seem arbitrary. The information should come from credible sources. It should be easy to read and easy to compare. And if you're doing those things, chances are you're going to do very well. And so I invite you to have fun with this assignment. You do have the opportunity, remember, if you've seen the assignment sheet, to choose your own adventure. And so come up with it. If you're not interested in any of the material I've provided, and I try to provide a wide swath, then come up with your own. And there's, the sky's the limit here. If you want to write about something that you know a great deal about, that's great. Maybe the most far-fetched example I've had folks write about ice augers. So they created a scenario where there's a guide service in Ashland, and they need to outfit themselves with a fleet of ice augers. They need to buy 10 of them, and they need to write a report to their boss convincing them that a particular option is the best and explain why it's the best. And so obviously there are certain things that a guide outfit would look for in an ice auger that maybe an individual consumer wouldn't look for, and so they obviously put a series of ice augers through the ringer and look at them across a set of criteria. I've also had people look at snowmobiles in the same light, so it really doesn't matter. What's most important to me, though, is that you're communicating to an audience who isn't an expert in the subject matter, and that you can express in clear terms the benefits or limitations of each option, and then ultimately make a recommendation for which option meets the needs of that particular reader at that particular time for that particular reason the best. So that's what we're up against, and that's really what we're going to spend time on through the rest of the semester. I'm currently working my way through your grades right now, and probably sometime by the end of this week I'll be able to email each of you with your current state of affairs, what your grade currently is based on not only your performance but your attendance, etc. And that should give you a really good sense of where you're at heading into the final couple of weeks. And then from there you can make any revisions or alterations that you see fit to help buoy that grade a little bit. So if you're not happy with where you're at, then we can certainly talk about ways that you can improve your grade and status in the class. I want grades to be transparent and an open book. I want you to know exactly where you're at and what you need to do to get to where you want to be. So if you have any questions about that, please feel free to let me know. I hope you had a really enjoyable Thanksgiving, and I hope that you have some fun with this assignment. It's an opportunity for you to be pretty creative, so you can think really creatively about how you want to present your data. That's something we'll talk a little bit more about in week number 2. But you can use tables, you can use charts, you can create scoring systems, but the most important thing is that you're transparent and systematic about it, that there is some method to your madness and that the reader can understand that. And the application of this is you will be asked to write reports in your future careers, and the most important part about a good report is that not only does it use high-quality information, but that it uses high-quality information systematically, that it's not applying one set of rules over here and another set of rules over here, but that it's really being transparent in the way that it's thinking about information and data. So that's really the most important part of what we're doing here. And it's going to force you to exercise all of the muscles and hopefully to good effect. So thanks a lot.